Approximately 5,000 years ago, long before telescopes or modern astronomy, the people of ancient Mesopotamia described a celestial body unlike any other known to humankind. According to their texts, it was the dwelling place of the Anunnaki, powerful beings who descended from the heavens to shape the destiny of early civilization. This world, called Nibiru, was said to follow an immense and distant orbit, vanishing beyond the sun for millennia before returning again. Each reappearance, they wrote, brought profound change to Earth: floods, upheaval, and the renewal of ages. For centuries, such accounts were regarded as myth. Yet beneath the sands of Iraq and Syria, archaeologists unearthed thousands of Sumerian tablets carved with astonishing precision. Far from simple allegory, many of these texts contain detailed observations of planetary motion and celestial order. The Sumerians built a mathematical system based on the number 60, a structure still visible today in how we measure time and geometry. Within this framework appeared a recurring value, 3,600. In Sumerian cosmology, 3,600 represented a complete celestial cycle known as a Shah. According to their records, Nibiru completed one orbit around the Sun in exactly one Shah, 3,600 years. Each cycle marked the end of one world age and the beginning of the next. Time, in their view, was not linear but cyclical, an endless rhythm written in the heavens, reflecting both the movement of the stars and the return of the gods. In the 20th century, the legend resurfaced through the work of Zecharia Sitchin, a researcher fluent in Sumerian and Akkadian. Interpreting the ancient tablets, Sitchin proposed that the Sumerians had preserved records of real events rather than symbolic myths. He concluded that Nibiru was an actual, undiscovered planet, tracing an elongated orbit far beyond Pluto, and that the Anunnaki were not imaginary deities but an advanced extraterrestrial race from that distant world. Sitchin suggested that these beings visited Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago, genetically modified early hominids, and engineered modern humanity as a hybrid species. When their planet receded into the outer reaches of the solar system, they departed, promising to return when Nibiru once again neared the Sunday. Mainstream science dismissed his ideas as speculative, but his work reignited public fascination with one of history's oldest cosmic enigmas. Centuries after the Sumerians first wrote of Nibiru, astronomers noticed something curious in the outer solar system. In 2016, researchers at the California Institute of Technology found evidence hinting at a massive unseen object far beyond Neptune. The strange alignment of several distant bodies suggested the pull of an invisible planet, a world they called Planet 9. Its long elliptical orbit echoed the trajectory Sitchin had described decades earlier, a surprising resonance between ancient myth and modern science. If Nibiru truly exists, and if its orbit of 3,600 years is real, its last passage near Earth would have occurred at the dawn of ancient Egypt. The next, by that timeline, may yet be approaching. Some view this as a warning of upheaval, others as a symbol of renewal. Either way, the story endures because it challenges our understanding of both human history and the structure of the cosmos. Across 5 millennia, the legend of Nibiru has never faded. From the earliest Sumerian inscriptions to Sitchin's reinterpretations, and now to the search for Planet 9, one question persists. Could there be a hidden world moving silently through the darkness beyond the sun? A world whose return once marked the crossing of gods and men? If this is your first time here, please like and subscribe so you do not miss future explorations into ancient civilizations and forgotten knowledge. Share your thoughts below. If you believe the planet Nibiru will return, type 1. If you believe it is only a myth, type 2. To know if Nibiru is real, we must go back to where it was first written, ancient Sumer. Long before telescopes or satellites, the people of ancient Mesopotamia looked to the sky and began writing the story of the universe in clay. Between 4,000 and 2,000 years before the Common Era, the Sumerians built one of humanity's first civilizations along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They invented writing, developed mathematics based on the number 60, and created the first known calendar. But perhaps their most extraordinary achievement was how they used these tools, not just to record daily life, but to understand the heavens. On thousands of tablets that have survived for more than 5,000 years, Sumerian scribes described what they believed to be the order of creation. They wrote of the heavens as a living system, guided by divine beings who came from above. These beings were called the Anunnaki, meaning the offspring of Anu, the great god of the sky. In their stories, the Anunnaki were not distant or invisible. They interacted with humanity, bringing knowledge, teaching agriculture, and shaping civilization itself. They were the bridge between heaven and earth. The Sumerians saw no separation between astronomy and religion. The movements of the stars and planets were signs of divine will. Each major city had its patron god, and each temple was aligned to a celestial event. The rising of Venus, the path of the sun, or the phases of the moon. The sky was their calendar, their scripture, and their measure of truth. Among the most intriguing words found on these tablets is Nibiru. It appears in texts that are part of the Babylonian creation story, known as the Enuma Elish, which preserves earlier Sumerian ideas. In these writings, Nibiru is described as a crossing point in the heavens, a place or object that governs the motion of other celestial bodies. It is associated with Marduk, a god of power and renewal, whose star was said to blaze brightly as it travelled across the sky. The ancient lines describing Nibiru are brief but precise. They speak of a luminous body moving through the heavens, setting the paths of the stars, and restoring balance among them. To the people who watched the sky every night, this image was not just poetic. It reflected an order they could see, where celestial events marked the rhythm of time and life on Earth. Modern scholars interpret Nibiru differently. Many see it as symbolic, a way for the Sumerians to represent cosmic order. Some identify it with Jupiter, the largest of the visible planets. Others suggest it refers to the equinox, the moment when the sun crosses the celestial equator and day and night are equal. In this view, Nibiru represents harmony, the point of balance that sustains the world. Even so, the language of these ancient texts leaves room for mystery. The description of a brilliant object that crosses the sky has fueled debate for decades. Was it only a metaphor, or did it describe something the Sumerians actually saw? To a civilization that charted every visible planet, the appearance of a bright and unusual light would have carried immense meaning. Whether divine or natural, it would have been recorded with the same reverence. Central to this system of thought was their unique way of measuring time. The Sumerians counted in multiples of 60, a base that still shapes how we divide hours and circles today. In this structure, the number 3,600 stood out as the complete number, 60 multiplied by 60. They called this unit a Shah. A single Shah represented a great cosmic cycle, a full turn of the heavens. It symbolized completion, the end of one era and the beginning of another. Time, to the Sumerians, was not a straight line. It moved in circles just as the planets moved through the sky. Each great cycle marked renewal and the return of balance between the divine and the mortal. The idea that the gods themselves came and went according to celestial patterns fit naturally into this worldview. When the heavens realigned, so too did life on Earth. In this way, three elements within their texts began to connect. Nibiru, the crossing in the sky, the number 3,600, the measure of a completed age, and the Anunnaki, the divine beings who descended when the heavens were in balance. Together, they formed the pattern that later generations would see as the foundation of a prophecy, that the planet of the gods follows a vast orbit, returning every 3,600 years to renew the world. Archaeologists and historians confirm that these tablets are real, their translations consistent, and their cosmology remarkably advanced. What remains uncertain is how literally their words should be taken. Were they describing an abstract principle of order, or preserving the memory of a celestial event witnessed by their ancestors? The question persists because the Sumerians were not myth-makers in the modern sense. They were record keepers. Their cuneiform tablets are the first written attempts to explain the relationship between the sky and the story of humanity. These are the facts as they survive in clay, a civilization obsessed with the sky, a word that means crossing, a number that defines completion, and gods who are said to return in cycles. Whether these ideas were metaphors or memories remains uncertain, but they show that the story of Nibiru and the 3,600-year cycle did not begin as a modern theory. It began as an ancient record, written by those who believed the heavens and the fate of humankind were one and the same. Centuries later, one man would read these same lines and see not poetry, but proof. In the next part, we meet Zecharia Sitchin, the man who revived the legend. Like this video to support us, and stay tuned for what comes next. Before modern astronomy began scanning the farthest edges of our solar system for new worlds, a historian named Zecharia Sitchin believed the ancients had already recorded one. Born in 1,920 inches, what is now Azerbaijan, Sitchin grew up fascinated by the ancient Near East. He learned to read Sumerian and Akkadian, the oldest written languages on Earth, and spent years studying the clay tablets unearthed from Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. While most scholars regarded these writings as mythology, Sitchin believed they preserved real history written in symbolic form. In 1976, he published The 12th Planet, the first in a series known as the Earth Chronicles. His idea was bold. The Sumerians, 5,000 years ago, had detailed knowledge of a distant world they called Nibiru, the 12th planet in the solar system, if one counted both the sun and the moon. According to Sitchin, this planet followed a vast, elongated orbit that carried it far beyond Pluto and back toward the sun once every 3,600 years, a cycle the ancients called a Shah. He described Nibiru as the planet of the gods, and its inhabitants as the Anunnaki, meaning those who from the heavens came. To Sitchin, these figures were not imaginary deities, but visitors from another world, an advanced civilization that arrived on Earth long ago. Their mission, he wrote, was to mine gold, a resource needed to repair the atmosphere of their own planet. In his view, ancient tales of gods who descended to Earth and brought knowledge were not myths, but memories of real events seen through the eyes of early people. Sitchin proposed that the Anunnaki created humanity by combining their own genetic material with that of early hominids. As Nibiru moved away from the sun, these beings departed, leaving behind their hybrid creation and the promise to return when their world came close again. He believed that every major leap in human progress reflected that same cosmic rhythm. Using Kepler's laws of planetary motion, Sitchin calculated that an orbit of 3,600 years would place the planet's average distance from the Sun at roughly 235 astronomical units, near the edge of the Kuiper belt. At such a distance, sunlight would be faint and the planet frozen, but as it drew nearer to the Sun, it might briefly become visible, a red light in the sky that ancient people could have recorded. According to his theory, Nibiru's passage through the inner solar system could disturb planetary orbits, triggering floods, volcanic eruptions, or shifts in climate. He links such passages to great cataclysms like the end of the Ice Age and the eruption of Thera around 1,600 years before the Common Era, moments when Earth's story seemed to reset. Scientists dismissed his claims as speculative. A planet passing that close to Earth would destabilize the solar system, and no evidence of such an object had been observed. Linguists argued that Nibiru meant crossing point, not a planet, and that Sitchin's translations were flawed, yet his books reached millions of readers. His ideas captured imaginations because they bridged myth and science, belief and astronomy. Even as academia rejected him, modern astronomy began uncovering evidence that sounded strangely familiar. In 2016, researchers Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown at the California Institute of Technology announced that several distant objects beyond Neptune were orbiting in the same direction, with similar tilts and eccentricities. This clustering was statistically unlikely to occur by chance. The simplest explanation was an unseen planet, several times more massive than Earth, pulling them into alignment. The scientists called it Planet 9. Their calculations suggested a world 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth, orbiting the Sun at an average distance of 400 to 800 astronomical units, far beyond the reach of our telescopes. One full orbit would take between 10,000 and 20,000 years. Although this was much longer than Sitchin's proposed 3,600-year cycle, the principle was similar: a massive hidden world shaping the outer solar system from afar. Follow-up studies strengthened the case. In 2017, the Subaru telescope in Hawaii began deep sky surveys searching for Planet 9's faint infrared glow. By 2019, teams from Caltech and Japan's National Astronomical Observatory ran supercomputer simulations showing that an undiscovered planet could produce the gravitational clustering seen in the Kuiper Belt. Distant trans-Neptunian objects, such as Sedna and 2012 VP 113, appeared to have been influenced by something massive far beyond Neptune. NASA noted that researchers continued investigating the possibility of a ninth planet, even if direct observation remained elusive. To supporters of Sitchin's ideas, these discoveries felt like validation. The possibility that an unseen planet could exist at the solar system's edge was no longer pseudoscience. It had entered mainstream astronomy. Planet 9 was not Nibiru, and its orbit was far longer, but the logic was the same. Large worlds can remain unseen, shaping their surroundings through gravity alone. Modern astrophysics supports this possibility. Objects at the edge of the solar system reveal that the region is far more complex than once thought. A planet orbiting at a similar distance near the Kuiper Belt could easily influence those frozen bodies without being visible from Earth. Finding such a world remains difficult. Even a Neptune-sized planet at 300 astronomical units would appear hundreds of times dimmer than Pluto. Only sensitive infrared instruments like NASA's WISE or the Vera Rubin Observatory could detect it. So far, no planet has been confirmed, but the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. To explain how Nibiru might affect Earth without destroying it, Sitchin suggested that its path passed safely between Mars and Jupiter at its closest approach. Though speculative, that idea parallels modern models showing how giant planets can migrate without destabilizing the system entirely. He also noted that ancient myths from many cultures, from the Mayan calendar to Hindu yugas and the Great Flood, describe cycles of destruction and renewal. He believed these stories were fragments of a single cosmic memory, the rhythm of the heavens shaping life on Earth. Mainstream science remains cautious. If a ninth planet exists, it would stay far beyond Neptune and pose no threat to Earth. Yet even astronomers like Batygin and Brown admit that the evidence for a hidden body is growing stronger. Its discovery would reshape our understanding of the solar system, and perhaps, in spirit, vindicate the ancient records that spoke of a wandering world. Whether Nibiru was real or symbolic, its story reminds us that the boundary between legend and science is never fixed. Each new discovery redraws it. What began as myth may one day become evidence, and what we call science today may someday return to myth. And if the Sumerians were truly describing real visitors from that distant world, then who were they? The answer lies in the next chapter, the story of the Anunnaki. If the story of Nibiru explains the movements of the heavens, then the story of the Anunnaki explains the origin of us. The ancient Sumerians described them not as spirits or symbols, but as living beings, tall radiant figures who came from the sky when their planet was near. They were called the Anunnaki, the offspring of Anu, the god of heaven. According to the tablets, they descended to Earth long before history began. The Enuma Elish, the Epic of Atrahasis, and the tablets of Enki and Enlil all tell fragments of the same story. Around 450,000 years ago, when Nibiru approached the inner solar system, the Anunnaki came to Earth seeking gold. They landed first in the region of the Persian Gulf and established Eridu, the home in the faraway. Later they expanded their search to other lands. The work was hard, and the Anunnaki grew restless. The tablets describe a rebellion among them, demanding relief from endless labor. Their leader Enki offered a solution that would change life on Earth forever. The texts tell of a moment of creation that sounds eerily close to genetic engineering. Enki and his sister, Ninhursag, took the essence of their own kind and combined it with that of a creature already living on Earth. The result was the first human, a being shaped in the image and likeness of its makers. Whether myth or memory, this story contains ideas far ahead of its time. The concept of mixing genetic material, of designing life through knowledge rather than chance, mirrors what modern science calls DNA manipulation. Thousands of years later, the Human Genome Project would reveal a sudden genetic leap in early humans, roughly 200,000 years ago, the same period Sitchin placed the creation of Homo sapiens. Scientists still debate what caused this leap, for the fossil record shows no clear path from primitive hominids to fully modern humans. The Sumerians wrote that after humanity was created, the Anunnaki taught agriculture, architecture, and astronomy. They built the first cities, laid out irrigation systems, and divided time into units that still shape our calendars. Writing, mathematics, and law appeared in Mesopotamia as if from nowhere. To the Sumerians, these were not human inventions but gifts, the knowledge passed down from their gods. In the myths, two figures dominate: Enki, the benefactor of humanity, and Enlil, the commander who saw humans as expendable. Their rivalry mirrored the tension between creation and control, knowledge and power. Enki sought to uplift humanity, while Enlil feared its growing independence. The Atrahasis epic tells how Enlil decided to cleanse the earth with a great flood when humans became too many, while Enki secretly warned his chosen servant to build a vessel and survive. The resemblance to the biblical story of Noah suggests that the Hebrew account was a retelling of an older Sumerian legend. Archaeologists have found flood layers in Mesopotamian sites dating to around 11,000 years before the Common Era, a time of great climate change that ended the last ice age. To Sitchin and others, this was the last close approach of Nibiru, an age when the Earth was reshaped by forces both natural and cosmic. After the flood, the Anunnaki withdrew. Some returned to their home world as Nibiru drifted away into the dark, while others stayed behind and ruled as kings and demigods. The Sumerians traced their royal lines to these beings. Their king lists record dynasties lasting thousands of years, lifespans far beyond those of ordinary humans. The earliest rulers were said to be those who ruled before the flood, suggesting that the first civilizations were governed by the Anunnaki themselves. We have explored the Sumerian king list in a separate video, where we dive deeper into this ancient record of rulers. You can check it out after this one. Across the world, echoes of this story appear in other traditions. In Egypt, the gods came from the stars and ruled before the pharaohs. In Mesoamerica, the gods descended from the heavens and taught people to count the cycles of the Sunday. In India, the Vedic texts speak of beings from other worlds who guided early humanity and then departed. Whether coincidence or collective memory, the pattern repeats. Knowledge arrives suddenly, civilization begins, and the gods promise to return. Modern genetics adds another layer. Some researchers note that parts of the human genome appear unusually distinct, as if introduced rather than evolved. Others observe that the rapid rise of agriculture, metallurgy, and language around 10,000 years before the Common Era happened too suddenly for gradual evolution. Mainstream science attributes it to cultural acceleration, but to believers it aligns perfectly with the moment the Anunnaki left humanity to continue alone. Whether real or symbolic, the story of the Anunnaki forces us to confront a question science still cannot fully answer. Why did human civilization begin so suddenly? And why there, in Mesopotamia, under the shadow of the first written words? The tablets offer one possible answer: that we were shaped, guided, and perhaps designed by those who came before. Today, scholars translate these myths as allegories of nature or the dawn of kingship. Yet even they acknowledge the precision with which the ancients described the stars and planets. For a people who claim their knowledge came from those who from the heavens came, the legacy they left is astonishing. If the Anunnaki once walked the earth, their story may still be written in our genes, our myths, and the stones of our oldest cities. And if Nibiru ever draws near again, the question that haunted the first civilizations may return: what happens when the gods come back? If the story of the Anunnaki is about our beginnings, then this part of the mystery asks a far more unsettling question: when will they return? Among the thousands of Sumerian tablets translated over the last century, one theme appears again and again: cycles of destruction and renewal tied to the movement of the heavens. Zecharia Sitchin believed these records were not poetic metaphors but astronomical data, messages left behind by those who witnessed the last approach of Nibiru. According to his timeline, the planet completes one full orbit around the Sun in vast intervals, each marking the rise and fall of ages. He argued that the last approach occurred around 1,600 years before the Common Era, an era marked by turmoil, the eruption of Thera in the Aegean Sea, the collapse of the Minoan civilization, and the rise of Egypt's new kingdom. To him, these were not isolated events but global aftershocks of a cosmic passage. Nibiru's return, If this was true, then the next appearance of the planet would fall sometime in the 21st or 22nd century. The idea may sound far-fetched, yet it is rooted in ancient logic. The Sumerians viewed time not as a straight line but as a wheel. Every great cycle ended with upheaval followed by renewal. Kings rose and fell, floods came and receded, and the heavens marked each change with precision. Sitchin believed that the same rhythm continues today, hidden in the geometry of the sky and in humanity's subconscious memory. In his later work, The End of Days, Sitchin wrote that the return of Nibiru would not necessarily bring destruction but remembrance. Their return will not bring fire, he said, but awakening. By that he meant a global realization, a moment when humanity would rediscover its true origins and confront the legacy of those who made us. Whether the Anunnaki would return physically or through the resurgence of their knowledge was uncertain. What mattered was that the cycle was nearing completion. Supporters of the theory point to the extraordinary acceleration of human progress in the last century. Flight, space travel, and genetic engineering within just a few generations. Some argue that we are retracing the steps of the Anunnaki, rediscovering what they once knew. The decoding of the human genome revealed the complexity of our design, while the rise of artificial intelligence hints at the next leap in evolution. Perhaps, as Sitchin suggested, humanity is preparing unconsciously for contact, evolving back toward its makers. There are also phenomena in the sky that continue to spark curiosity. Infrared surveys have detected unidentified objects near the edge of the solar system. None match the description of Nibiru, yet they keep the discussion alive. Meanwhile, the search for Planet 9 grows more refined with each study. To believers, these findings echo the ancient prophecy, a scientific reflection of a story written in clay thousands of years ago. But what does return truly mean? Some interpret it literally, as the reappearance of a planet whose gravity once influenced Earth's destiny. Others see it as symbolic, an awakening within human consciousness. In Sumerian thought, the heavens and the soul mirrored each other. When the stars realigned, so did human awareness. By that logic, the return of Nibiru may not be a celestial event at all, but a spiritual one, the reactivation of a memory encoded deep within humanity itself. Archaeology and mythology offer strange parallels. Across millennia, new civilizations have emerged as if guided by invisible hands. After the flood came Sumer, then Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Each carried fragments of the same myth, the gods who descended from the stars, taught knowledge, and vanished with a promise to return. In every age, the memory faded, yet the expectation remained. Sitchin saw this pattern as the resonance of human history with Nibiru's unseen orbit. Modern science neither confirms nor disproves the prophecy. Astronomers caution that no data supports a planet passing near Earth within the next 1,000 years. Still, the idea endures because it bridges myth and meaning. It speaks to a deep human instinct, the sense that history moves in vast repeating cycles, and that we may be nearing another turning point. Across cultures, prophecies of renewal abound. The Mayan long count calendar ended in 2012, marking what many believed was a spiritual transition rather than an end. In Hindu cosmology, each yuga concludes with the return of divine beings and the restoration of order. Even modern physics recognizes cycles of expansion and contraction, shaping the universe itself. Perhaps the Sumerian idea of great ages was another expression of this universal rhythm. If so, then the prophecy of Nibiru is less about prediction and more about perception. It asks us to look beyond fear and see a broader truth, that life and knowledge rise and fall in rhythm with forces greater than ourselves. Whether those forces are planets, gods, or the mathematics of time, the result is the same, renewal after reckoning. For Sitchin, that reckoning was not punishment, but remembrance. Humanity, he wrote, was approaching the threshold of self-discovery, a moment when we would understand our origins not through faith but through science. The return of Nibiru, in whatever form it takes, would mark the completion of a cycle, a reminder that everything which begins must also come back around. Today, the prophecy endures, not because it predicts doom, but because it reflects our own curiosity. We look to the sky for meaning just as the Sumerians did. Every comet, every alignment, every unexplained light becomes a whisper from the past. Whether or not Nibiru exists, the idea of it continues to shape how we imagine our place in the cosmos. If each age ends in remembrance, then the real question is not whether Nibiru will return, but what humanity will become when it does. Will we fear the gods of our ancestors, or will we meet them as equals, aware of the shared origin that connects us across time and space? Still listening? Please give this video a like to support us. As the legend of Nibiru entered the modern age, it faced its greatest test, the scrutiny of science. For decades, astronomers, linguists, and historians have searched for physical proof behind the story. What they found was not confirmation, but something equally revealing. In December 2012, a wave of panic spread across the internet. Rumors claimed that a hidden planet named Nibiru was on a collision course with Earth, fulfilling an ancient prophecy of destruction. NASA responded with an official statement, saying there is no credible evidence of a planet approaching Earth. Nibiru does not exist. The agency explained that any world large enough to threaten Earth would have been detected long ago. Its reflected light, infrared heat, or gravitational pull would make it impossible to hide. 5 years later, in 2017, NASA reiterated its stance, calling the Nibiru story an internet hoax. Observations across the solar system showed no irregularities in planetary orbits, no unexplained gravitational influence, and no hidden masses. By 2021, the conclusion was the same. If a massive 12th planet existed within our solar system, every telescope on Earth would already see it. While astronomy provided data, linguistics offered context. Scholars such as Samuel, Noah, Kramer, and Michael Heiser revisited the cuneiform tablets where the word Nibiru first appeared. Their translations revealed that, in Babylonian astronomy, Nibiru meant crossing point, a reference to a place in the sky where celestial bodies aligned. In different texts, it referred to Jupiter, Mercury, or the equinox itself. To the ancients, Nibiru symbolized transition and renewal, not a physical world beyond the Sunday. That interpretation changed the conversation. What modern readers once took literally may have been poetic, encoded in the language of ancient astronomy. And yet, astronomers have not stopped searching. The ongoing hunt for what they now call Planet 9 continues to scan the dark edges of the solar system for hidden worlds, a scientific quest that echoes the curiosity of the ancients. In recent years, researchers have proposed that an undiscovered planet far beyond Neptune could explain the clustering of certain distant objects. Unlike the destructive myths of Nibiru, this search is guided by mathematics and observation, not prophecy. Whether Planet 9 exists or not, it represents humanity's enduring desire to understand what lies beyond. The boundary between science and legend, then, is not measured by proof alone but by wonder. Science waits for evidence. Myth preserves meaning. Both arise from the same human impulse, to find order in the unknown. Today, with telescopes capable of peering billions of light years away, we are closer than ever to mapping our cosmic neighborhood. Yet even as we fill the gaps of our solar system, the question that began in ancient Mesopotamia still lingers. What else is out there, hidden in the dark? Perhaps the ancients mistook symbols for worlds, or perhaps their symbols preserved memories of something real, an encounter long forgotten. Either way, their curiosity started a conversation that science continues today. In that sense, Nibiru is not a failed prophecy but a successful question, one that refuses to fade as long as we keep looking at the stars. If you have made it this far, thank you for joining us. Give this video a like, subscribe for more explorations of ancient mysteries, and tell us what you think below. Do you believe Nibiru was only a legend, or could a hidden world still be waiting to be found? Until next time, and good night.